Hello and welcome to the video. In this particular video I'm going to be looking at the original Royal Scots that were built by the LMS from 1927 to about 1930 and as modelled by Bachmann and Wrenn. So we'll have a look at each and every one and we can make the comparisons and see what we can make of these locomotives. The first one is, I think, the Prince of Wales Volunteers Regiment or something like that. I can't look at the nameplate. Can you read that? Let's see if we can find that. Yes, the Prince of Wales Regiment, South Lancashire, I think. Anyway, this one was actually first produced by Mainline, and I got this in about 1982, thereabouts. So, in fact, it's been around quite a long time. What I eventually did with this, as I did with practically all my Mainline locomotives, was to get a replacement Bachmann chassis when Bachmann took over the tooling and actually produced a much better and more reliable chassis and motor drive. So the thing which actually gives this one away as being Mainline, I think, is probably the lack of cab glazing. But I think this is quite a reasonably good looking model. It does bring out the main features of the original Royal Scots, that massive sort of appearance. Yes, the other thing which I think gives it away as being Mainline is the slight sheen on the Brunswick green, and that the boiler bands are just orange. But for its time, I think that was a pretty good model. Sort of the next one along the line is the Manchester Regiment. Now this one is one that was manufactured by Bachmann. Now I don't know if we can see, there is a slight modified front end appearance with the number plate on the smoke box, and I don't know if we can get in close enough to see that. But you see the corners of the number plate have just been edged in white on that model. Now that's not a little manufacturer's quirk. Pictures of that particular locomotive show it with the front number plate exactly as produced there. So that's a little bit of individuality that's on that locomotive. And again, you can see that Bachmann have actually improved the lining out on that, because you've got the black-orange lining boiler bands. That's a nice looking locomotive. And you can see that the cab's been glazed. I've added some coal to the tender. You didn't see these running around in British Railways because most of them were all rebuilt by 1955. Quite a number of them made it into British Railways, about 18, I think, as many as 18, and they were very steadily, if slowly, rebuilt as and when was needed. But with it being 1955, you don't see these running around with the later emblem on the tender. But a nice looking engine. Nicely, the green is well represented. A nice deep Brunswick green. Next one along is Royal Scot itself. Now this one, I think, came in a presentation box with a certificate, and it's the class leader, and it had that unique feature where the name was spread across the front of the smoke box. and it went on a tour of America and Canada, and it successfully pulled its, I think it was an 11-coach LMS formation of LMS coaches over the Rockies without any assistance. So you know, it did do well on its visitation to North America, and of course on the nameplate there is a commemorative plaque sort of outlining where it went and how the miles it covered, and that nameplate and plaque now exists on 46100 Royal Scot, as it is preserved now. Of course, it's been rebuilt with the taper boiler. But yes, this does look nice. Nicely lined. And again, the massive appearance of these locomotives is well represented. So what have we got next? Right, we've got the original look of the Royal Scot here class, as first built in 1927. So without smoke deflectors and with the standard LMS tender as it was at the time. It was almost like a default setting. Any locomotives that the LMS built before Stania were defaulted to this standard Fowler tender, which in my opinion does not suit the locomotive at all. In fact, it looks faintly ridiculous, but that's my opinion. But it's good to have the representation here of how they first looked when they were first being produced. I'll cover in shortly afterwards about how these engines came about. Let's just look at the features of this locomotive. I think without the smoke deflectors you can see just how small that chimney is compared to the boiler. You can see there it looks proportionally or disproportionately small, but apparently it was not a detriment to the locomotive's performance. The drafting was good, the steaming was good, but I'll cover that a bit later in terms of how these locomotives performed and worked out for the LMS. So this next one is probably the best of the Bachmann ones. Now, they haven't altered anything here. It's still the same tooling. I think this one's called the Warwickshire regiment. Yeah, 6131. Now, the reason I say this is probably the best is that, like all the Bachmann locomotives, they did progressively improve the look and the appearance of them without necessarily having to change anything major. In other words, the tooling remained the same. But what you get is a slightly better finish and a slightly sharper look. And it's certainly the case with this one. This one does look quite smart. You can see that the Walschaerts valve gear and motion work has been slightly darkened. I think that improves the appearance, and just the way the lining out appears on the splashes, it does look very neat and sharp. And again, it's in their, not their final form, but the final sort of original form, if that makes sense, with smoke deflectors and a large Stania tender to which they were much more suited. So that's Warwickshire regiment. And moving on, we've got one in the striking LMS black, which came out after the Second World War. This one's a Cheshire regiment, and compared to the Warwickshire regiment, I think you can determined that this is a slightly earlier Bachmann model by virtue of the slightly shinier valve gear and look to the wheels. But again, it does look striking in that livery. I do like that black lined out with straw and maroon, or straw and cherry as it's sometimes referred to. Again, you can see the small chimney. And the boiler mountings. There's a nice sheen on that boiler. They do look very smart. I know some model railway enthusiasts have said that, you know, this needs to be redone. It can be, we should be able to get something better than this. But personally speaking, I'm quite happy with these as they are for the moment. Yeah, a good looking locomotive. Details on the front, you can see I've added some lamps there. Express passenger. Enhances the appearance. There's coal in the tender as well on that one. And I put a crew in. All the crews I put in my locomotives, where I do get around to putting them in, are basically the old triangle ones from 1963, which Hornby have kept on producing. I'm not sure they do them anymore, but they're a far better representation than the ones that were in Bachmann locomotives, which were quite, well, quite poor in fact. Anyway, so that concludes the listings or the locos that I have of this class of locomotives in the Bachmann range. So we're going to have a look now at the original Royal Scots as modelled by Wrenn. So we can detect here that there are some differences. I think the locomotive, certainly the cab, is quite a bit higher up than it is on the Bachmanns. I have put them together, and strangely enough, the Bachmann and the Wrenn are pretty much similar in terms of overall appearance and overall height, size, etc. It's the details which are different. But of course, these are made of die-cast metal. Let me look at the front there. Very impressive looking locomotive. That one's 6100 Royal Scot itself. It probably didn't obtain the Stanier tender until much later in life. It was probably paired with the Fowler tender, if we're looking at it without its smoke deflectors. But these are really fine locomotives. They were one of the few that Wrenn actually built and modelled themselves. From what I can see of the locomotive, the cylinders and the motion work look identical or pretty close to what's on the Duchess Coronation Class Pacifics, which date back to Hornby Dublo days. Some very interesting features also, which Wrenn have done well to capture. I'll get that right so it stays in focus. If you look at the first driving wheel and the coupling rod where it joins on, the big end, it's been squared off into quite a large looking appearance. Now that is actually spot on. If you look at the original photographs of these locomotives, they had this massive big end on the first driving wheel, and Wrenn have done really well to capture that. It's not seen on any of the Bachmann locomotives, there again, you know, if it's going around on the layout, it's not something one would easily see. But nevertheless, it's a detail which Wrenn have actually featured in and factored into this model. Of course, the other thing which singles these out from other Wrenn locomotives is all the centre wheels are flanged and to size with the other driving wheels, and they've also gone to the extent of putting compensation in the chassis, so enabling these locomotives to negotiate the standard sort of curves you get on model railways, and they've made a really good job of that. As runners, I would say that they are the best running locomotives of all the Wrenn models. They are smooth and they are powerful and they're extremely fast. So moving on, the next one here is Lancashire Witch, also in the LMS Maroon, and this one has a limited run. It's not a limited edition locomotive, but only something like 300 were made during Wrenn's existence. So it's a bit of a rare find. Again, that nameplate's pretty impressive. Again, massive appearance, good looking locomotive. Also, these locomotives, the Lancashire Witch, all had 5-pole motors. Now, I've got mixed feelings about the 5-pole motors on these Wrenn locomotives. They don't seem to add anything at all, but the 3-pole motor, which suggests that it's far superior to the 3-pole motor. I think that's possibly because it's the 3-pole motor that's so outstandingly good. The 5-pole motor is just, well, it doesn't really add very much. There might be some better hauling characteristics at low speed, perhaps, but I've not come across it. They're not faster, they're not necessarily smoother, and they just sound the same. Nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong at all, but the fact that their introduction to the or their application rather to the models, to the full range of Wrenn models, was very erratic. Some had them, some didn't. Only certain batches that were made at a certain time were fitted with 5-pole motors, and potential purchasers were invited to request and order a 5-pole motor. So it seems. So if one's looking to collect these locomotives now, Wrenn locomotives, it's pretty hit and miss whether you get them with 5-pole motors or 3-pole motors. But I've got a few of them with 5-pole motors, and I can't really proclaim that they are superior to the 3-pole motors. Certainly not from the running characteristics that I've found. Nothing, and I hasten to add, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with their running characteristics. It's just that the 3-pole motor is outstanding. Anyway, moving on, we've got one here in BR Green, and that one is, what is it? I can't read it. Grenadier Guardsman, yes. Lovely looking locomotive. And the next one is Blackwatch in LMS Black, lined out with straw and cherry. So a comparative or a comparison between both the Wrenn and the Bachmann original Royal Scot in all the same liveries. And I'll leave it to you to determine which you think you would prefer or you think are the best. So at that particular juncture, I will leave it there, and I thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about these. Be interested in your comments. So I'll just pan across them one more time.